The internet thought Kendall Jenner had everything handed to her. Until this happened. When you hear the name Kendall Jenner, it's easy to think of fame, luxury, designer clothes, private jets, and one of the most famous families in Hollywood. She grew up in front of millions of people. Her family was already famous. And when she decided to become a model, the internet had one immediate reaction. Of course, she made it. She's a Jenner. And honestly, it's not hard to understand why people thought that. Kendall grew up on Keeping Up with the Kardashians, surrounded by cameras and celebrities from a young age. But there was something she wanted that was different from the reality TV world her family had built. She wanted to become a serious fashion model. And that's where things started getting complicated because being born into a famous family can open doors, but it can also make people question whether you actually deserve to walk through them. When Kendall began pursuing modeling professionally as a teenager, she quickly became one of the most recognizable young faces in fashion. She appeared in major campaigns, walked high-profile runways, and became a fixture at fashion events. But instead of everyone celebrating her success, a huge part of the internet started doing the opposite. People accused her of getting opportunities simply because of her last name. Every runway appearance was analyzed, every magazine cover was debated, and every major opportunity came with the same question: would she have gotten this if she wasn't a Jenner? That question followed Kendall throughout her career, and that's what made her journey so unusual. Most models spend years trying to become recognizable. Kendall had the opposite problem. She was already extremely recognizable before she even became an established model. Fashion designers and photographers weren't introducing Kendall to the public. The public was already watching her. So instead of trying to become famous, she had to convince people that she could actually belong in the fashion industry. And that pressure became even bigger because Kendall was entering an industry where credibility matters. Being famous can get attention, but it doesn't automatically make someone a successful model. Kendall still had to work in front of cameras, learn how to move on the runway, handle criticism, travel constantly, and deal with the expectations that came with having millions of people watching her every move. And there was another problem. She couldn't escape her family name. If Kendall succeeded, people could say her family got her there. If she failed, millions of people would see it. There was almost no way for her to win in the eyes of everyone online. But Kendall kept going. And over time, her career became much bigger than reality television. She became one of the most recognizable models of her generation. She worked with major fashion brands and appeared on countless covers and campaigns. And whether people loved her or criticized her, there was one thing they couldn't deny: Kendall had become a major name in fashion. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. Kendall herself has spoken about the pressure of growing up famous and being constantly compared to other people. Imagine being a teenager and having millions of strangers discussing your appearance, your career, your relationships, and your choices. For most people, criticism comes from a few people around them. For Kendall, criticism could come from the entire internet, and that's something people often forget when they look at celebrity success. From the outside, everything can look effortless. The designer clothes, the runway, the expensive vacations, the famous friends, the massive social media following. But behind all of that is a person trying to figure out who they are while the whole world is watching. And Kendall's story became especially interesting because she was trying to build an identity outside of her family's reality TV empire. Her sisters had already established themselves in entertainment, beauty, and business. Kendall chose a different path. Fashion became her lane, and eventually she became known less as simply Kim and Kylie's sister and more as Kendall Jenner, the model. That doesn't mean the criticism disappeared. It didn't. Even today, people continue to debate how much her family connections helped her career. And that's probably a debate that will never completely go away. But there's another way to look at it. Kendall didn't choose the family she was born into. She was born into fame. What she did with that fame was her choice. And that's what makes her story worth talking about. Because her journey isn't really a story about someone who had nothing and became famous. It's the opposite. It's the story of someone who started with almost every advantage imaginable and still had to deal with the challenge of proving that she could build something of her own. The internet saw the privilege, but it didn't always see the pressure. And maybe that's the biggest lesson from Kendall Jenner's story. Sometimes having an advantage doesn't mean the journey is easy. It simply means your challenges look different. Kendall Jenner may have started with a head start, but the world was watching to see whether she could actually finish the race. And whether you believe she earned her place in fashion or benefited heavily from her family name, one thing is impossible to ignore. Kendall Jenner turned her famous last name into a global career and made herself impossible to ignore. And that is exactly why people are still talking about her.